How does one define beauty? Tall, fair, long hair, slim? Nah. Beauty is very complex and it cannot be what is dictated by the society. True beauty has no boundaries. It has no definition and is deeply personal. My next guest on Different Strokes defies this very definition of beauty by enduring a near-fatal accident that changed the way she looked forever. But is she beautiful? Oh, hell yes. She is what tough people are made of, and that is what makes her beautiful inside out. My name is Deeksha Sethi, and you're listening to Different Strokes. Please welcome Neha Walia. Thank you very much, Neha, for agreeing to be a part of Different Strokes. This is season 2 and episode 3. I want to begin by asking you the first question that I ask every guest. Tell me about the life-altering incident that you had.
Well, you're welcome, Deeksha, and it's wonderful to be on this show. And I've, had a chance to hear the previous podcasts, and I think it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
And it's a very good it's a very good communication medium for people, like-minded people who've have some kind of stories to share. So yeah, coming to mine. I you know me, right? We've been college mates, and
yeah,
I was a person who never ever wanted to deal with any challenging situation in my life. I was that way. I don't know why, but I was. I used to think that life should be smooth. I don't want to be in a very difficult position. I don't know. I thought maybe I didn't have the confidence to deal with that kind of situation. But it was, I think, on 1st February. I still all these memories are so fresh, still. 1st February 2011. 2 months of being married, and we took our first trip to Delhi to visit a family event, social event. And it was recently married. We did not have the time to kind of plan for a honeymoon. So we thought that let's take this quick trip as a sort of pre-honeymoon vacation.
Right.
So both of us, while visiting Delhi, we decided to go and see this amusement park. It was it was called the Adventure Island. And it was supposed to be this new adventure park where all these rides, exciting, thrilling rides were there. And so we decided that let's spend a nice afternoon there. During that visit, my husband bought a ticket for this go-karting thing. He somehow, just before he was supposed to, take the ride, somehow he decided that he didn't want to go in. Because, see, one of the reasons was that those go-karting cars were quite small. My husband's 6 feet. So he thought that he wouldn't fit in, so he said, I would not take this ride.
Okay.
And I somehow I decided that, chalo, I'll take this ride. If you're not going, then I'll go in. And I sat inside the car. I was too short for it. So I had to make an adjustment with the seat and everything. And the helmet that was given to me was not my size.
Okay.
So usually there are rules for such high-risk adventure rides, right? You are supposed to provide the person who's taking the ride with all kind of, gear, safety gear. So these guys gave me this helmet, which was 2 sizes too big for me. And I asked them for a change, that give me another one. And I was given a very direct reply that, Madam, yehi standard size hai, and you won't get another one. So then I decided, there were too many red flags though, but then I somehow decided, chalo, I'll make two of it. So I went ahead, and the car, when I started the car, it with a jerk. And with that jerk, my hair, I had like knee-long length hair.
Yeah.
So what happened was my hair inside the helmet got loose. I had tied them in a bun. And I didn't realize it because it was winters and I was wearing a high neck. And just 2 minutes into that ride, my hair got stuck in the axle of the car, and my entire scalp came off. It was just seconds. All of this happened in just seconds, But when that happened, it was like, I don't know, I went numb immediately and I did not pass out. I was bleeding, yet conscious of whatever was happening around me. I started seeing these people screaming and shouting around me. Everybody gathered. They were calling for ambulance. They were calling for help. My husband, I could see him. He went into this panic mode, I think within half an hour, we reached the nearest hospital. The ambulance came 15 minutes late. And somehow we managed to the hospital. And I was told by the doctors that I had suffered a rare scalp avulsion injury, which means that my entire scalp with all its layers came off from my forehead till nape. And my skull was exposed. And I had, injuries on my skull as well. So, yes, it was life-threatening, and we even the doctors did not know at that time that if I would survive or not. So then I was taken into a surgery, an 8-hour-long surgery. And after that, 11 days of being in ICU, and then, multiple microsurgeries, I was able to somehow gain my conscious, and then I realized what was happening around me.
Right.
So,
I remember speaking to you. You were still in the hospital. I still remember that conversation when I called you, and you were very alert, and you narrated everything on your own. But I mean, I couldn't sense that you were afraid, or, it had still sunk in. I couldn't sense that, that, oh my God, this has happened, but you were still very chatty and chirpy about it. And I wasn't surprised because I know you, and you were always this enthusiastic, energetic person. But what were you really feeling deep inside? Because I know sometimes for our family, for the people we love, for their sake, sometimes we have to put a brave face up. But what was really going on inside you?
True. What you're saying is true. See, immediately after my accident, I told you, right, I was conscious all throughout my accident, and on my way to the hospital. Even my ambulance got into an accident on my way to so I was like, I saw everything. I was quite alert all the time, and but like I said, I went numb in the sense that I couldn't feel the pain, or probably my brain blocked that kind of pain that I was going through. But I knew everything that was happening around me, and this continued for that period of 15 to 20 days post my accident. The first time I opened my eyes inside the ICU after my surgery, I started inquiring about my family. I started calling the nurse, try to have small talk with them, and just to ensure myself that I'm fine. I've not lost out on my speech or my hearing, or my my limbs are moving or not. Or I was quite conscious of that, because it was a head injury, and we did not know the repercussions yet. So that ways I was quite active throughout my hospitalization, I would say. And yes, that feeling of accepting that this happened to me came quite later. Right. Until that time I thought that okay, it's too early to judge, because the initial surgery that was done was not complete. I was supposed to go through a few more after that. So when it was only after 15th or 16th day when I was discharged from the hospital and went to my uncle's home where I stayed for the rest of my treatment. After I went home, I just that feeling sunk in, that okay, this has happened to me.
Yeah.
And this could be dangerous. This could be a lifelong, it could have lifelong implications. So it was only then when I kind of accepted that, okay, something has happened in my life that is that it's not going to be not going to be the same thing. Until that time period, I was quite okay. I was not feeling any kind of anger, any kind of emotion at that time.
Right.
I was pretending that it was okay. It was just another injury. And one of the reasons was because of my parents. My parents, I thought that if I would put a brave face, maybe my parents would be a little less worried.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons.
Right.
And of my kind of initial reaction.
Right. And how many rounds of surgeries did you have?
Well, I went through a total of 5 surgeries, including 3 big ones, reconstructive surgeries, and over a period of 2.5 years.
Right.
So the first 2 happened within a period of 6 months. And then the others, I think within a gap of 3 to 6 months, another 3 surgeries.
Right. And I know it must be, this question must be painful for you, but I do want to understand, when was the first time you actually looked at yourself in the mirror?
Well, it was after my second surgery. See, they had to, because like I told you, all the layers of my scalp were gone off. They had to rebuild that entire layer of tissues, to cover my scalp. So they had to drill these holes inside my skull. It was like I had my head drilled in multiple points. And so it was not I had this bandaged head for 6 to 8 months. So after the second surgery, somewhat they covered like 70% of the injured scalp with tissue. So that time I had to like go in for a change of bandage every like twice a day. So during one of these visits to the doctor, I asked the doctor that can I look at myself now? So he asked me, he said, will you be okay? I mean, and in kind of ensured that I wouldn't be too shocked to see myself in the mirror. So he kind of briefly, I used to have a lot of chats with my doctor, even while dressings were being done. And so I used to talk to him and ask him, what are you doing? What kind of procedure it involves? What? So that way I was not quite scared. But then he said, okay, fine, let's do this.
Okay.
So he in the clinic, when I first saw myself, it wasn't like a shock. It didn't come as a shock to me because I was already quite aware of my situation. So but yes, it was kind of distressing, and I didn't like myself. I didn't like what I saw because my head still had those uncovered portions, and I wasn't sure if they would be, they would be completely healed or not. So yeah, it was kind of a very distressing feeling.
And did you at some point think or hope that you would be able to look the same like you looked before the accident, with all these reconstructive surgeries?
Well, I hoped so. And for a very long time, I had this hope that, maybe with these reconstructive surgeries and then cosmetic procedures available these days, maybe I would get back to my, previous self. I had... one of the reasons that I was too distressed was that I had really long hair, and I know so many people in my life who used to tell me that they were the best, they were my best, let's say,
asset.
best physical aspect.
Yeah.
So I was quite in that sense, I was hoping that maybe one day with all these cosmetic procedures I'll be able to be get back to that kind of physical itself. So but then I don't think I ever took it for like a surety that
Somewhere deep
I
down
knew
inside
that.
you knew.
Yes, I knew that it's a rarity. Because I used to talk to my doctors. Like I said, I used to talk to my doctors a lot. I used to inform myself about these medical procedures involved in my recovery. So of course, I was hopeful, but not very. I was not 100% sure.
Not delusional.
No, not at all.
Right. And you mentioned about your husband, right? I want to go back to that for a bit and ask you about what was your husband's reaction? What was his family's reaction? Because you were newly married, and the timing of this accident was really unfortunate. So what was their reaction like? How did they take it?
Their reaction was quite obvious. My husband, I think it was equally painful and difficult for him, the situation. One of the reasons is because he's always had this protected life. He never had to face that kind of, I would say, adversity.
Right.
And never had to face that kind of situation where he was the responsible person and he had to look for solutions. So in that sense, it was a very difficult time for him. It took longer for him to accept what happened to me than myself. There was a point when I used to assure him that everything's fine, I am fine. Thankfully, I was still an able-bodied person.
Right.
It did not kind of had that kind of impact. So I used to kind of convince him that I'm all right and I'm fine, I'm not feeling any pain now. It was very difficult for him to get to terms to the fact that yes, my hair will never grow back, or my scalp would always be vulnerable to injuries.
Right.
So and similar was with the family. My in-laws, they were quite they kind of looked at me with that pity and sympathy. But I feel that yes, they used to there was a time when I used to face these looks. I used to get these looks inside my home when I came back to my home after 8 or 9 months of my surgery. I used to, they were concerned, but then they did not know how to deal with the situation, actually. I feel.
Right.
So the first reaction, their first sentiment towards me was of pity, of sympathy, And but then later on, I think everybody, because I was the one who had to convince all these people around me that I was okay.
Right.
And when I did that, with time, they kind of also, got to this term with this situation that, fine. If she's saying that she's okay and she's dealing with it like that, then she's okay.
Right. And during this entire course, did you come across, I'm sure, there are lots of people, since you were newly married and, relatives are still coming in and neighbors, etc. Everyone's curious, right, to meet the new bride and all. And I don't think they even got a chance to do that in your case. So, when you meet them, what was their reaction like? And did you come across something unsavory, some unsolicited advice coming your way, etc.? Any incident that was very unpleasant for you to even deal with?
Yes, a lot of times, like I said, majority of people around me used to treat me like I'm this bichari girl, who had this bad luck of experiencing this accident. So a lot of people used to tell me, give me these typical reactions like koi baat nahi, baal hi to hai, and it's all right, your life would not stop here. I already knew all these things, right?
Yeah.
But it was the tone, sometimes the tone was too patronizing, sometimes the tone, like I said, it was too pitiful, right?
Yeah.
They used to feel sad for me all the time, and then again and again reaffirm this fact that that this accident, and after this accident, now I'm like this sad a woman who's never going to get her life back.
Right.
So yes, I didn't quite like to meet a lot of people after my accident.
Right.
I used to tell my mother-in-law and my husband that if somebody was over and I wanted to meet me, I was like, no, please tell them that I'm not okay, or I'm sleeping or something, because
Right.
I used to avoid those kind of questions and queries and those looks, those things,
Yeah.
because it used to affect me. I was quite
understandably.
confident.
Of course,
Yeah,
understandably, it would impact you. And I do want to ask you, how did this entire incident impact your self-esteem? Did it have an impact on that?
See, initially it did. Like I said, when I was after my first surgery, I think I was already 3 months into recovery at that time, and at that time I used to kind of feel that a lot of anger and hatred towards myself. Because I used to think that it all happened because of my judgment, my lack of judgment, my
Right.
if I had not decided to sit on that car,
Right.
probably this thing wouldn't have happened. So I used to like kind of
Blame
take it out
yourself.
on myself. Yes, blame myself, and I used to feel like damaged goods. I used to feel that okay, now that I don't have my hair and my scalp is all distorted, nobody's going to look at me. I'm going to look like this freak or like something like that, and people are going to be like sad for me, and I'm going to be sad for me.
Right.
But then gradually with time, I don't know when it first started, but this process of getting my life back, and I decided that I have to get my life back. I would not let myself become this this person who's going to lament herself all through her life that over just one incident. So I kind of started, like I said, I used to talk to my doctors, I used to take guidance from them, I used to discuss my problems with them, my anxieties, my fears, whatever I was feeling that I did not or I couldn't share with my family. I used to do that with my doctor.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to have a good doctor who he was quite realistic with me,
Okay.
So all these things helped me in a way that I used to always look towards myself to kind of find that kind of strength within me to overcome these things. Now I when I came back to I stayed in Delhi throughout my treatment initially, and I came back to Amritsar 10 months after my accident. And when I came back home, the first thing I wanted to do was to go back to work.
Yeah.
Because I needed that kind of change, that kind of,
regained confidence as well.
Something to drive me at least.
Yeah.
To make me, get up every day and look towards the day.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get back to my work. And when I did that, somehow I found that confidence coming back. I started accepting myself the way I was, because I used to, like I told you, for 2 years until my last surgery was done, I used to have a bandaged head.
Right.
And I used to go about, doing all my course with that. So first of all, I accepted myself in my situation at that time, and then I started getting that confidence back.
Right.
I used to approach people with confidence. I used to approach people with a happy face, with a smile, so that the other person kind of responds that way.
Yes.
And doesn't feel sorry.
Yeah. And when you joined work after 9 months, how did people take you at work? Did they receive you well? Were they positive about it?
Yes. They were, quite relieved, I would say. A lot of people kind of were quite relieved that I was all right. I was moving, and I was, I was doing things. So they were. I was. The first thing that kind of helped me was that my quite normal atmosphere at my workplace was very encouraging for me.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And yes, I of course I used to take a lot of precautions because I had limited movability.
Yeah.
But due to the injury, but then of course, see a lot of people at my friends, my work colleagues, they kind of normalized this situation for me. So it became easier for me also to kind of absorb that. So that's how I think that was the biggest changer for me.
Right. Okay, that's wonderful to know, and it's a great relief to even know that, such workplaces exist where colleagues can be so supportive, and, such a support system can really pick you up back into confidence and overcome such a tragic, severe accident. I do want to talk about your two little girls. Now you're raising such beautiful little girls. Do they know about what has happened with you? Do they ask you questions?
Yes, they don't know it in the sense that they don't understand the entire situation. But yes, see, I wear a lot of times I wear scarf at home. When I'm at home, I wear scarf. I take off the implant. So, I've already had that talk with them. I've already told them that yes, you have to be very careful with mama's head and everything because I have an injury. So they kind of, they're okay with it. They know that they have to take care when they're around me. And there's nothing weird about it. For them, it's quite normal for them. They sometimes joke about it. They sometimes take care of me. They pamper me sometimes. They're like they're not reacted to it in a very different manner.
So when I've always seen you like that.
They're 3. Yes, they're just 3 now. Right? I have twins and they're 3. And they're too young to understand the gravity of the situation currently. But whenever they grow up to an age where they can understand what happened, I would definitely have the talk with them. Definitely like to explain it to them what happened, and I'm sure they would understand.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's the best thing about children. They will accept you in whatever form and shape or deformed or bent out of shape we are. That's the beauty of children.
For them, I'm their mother nonetheless. They don't hair, no hair, they don't care.
Absolutely. So, it's unconditional love. No questions asked. That's the beauty of having children around. Great. Okay, I do want to ask you again about your parents. I never asked you about them. How did they take this?
They were quite brave all throughout that experience. They were quite brave. They were there. One of them was always with me while the treatment was going on in Delhi. Right. So, they took it well on the outside, but I know that from the inside it kind of scared them to the core. Sometimes, especially my mother. This incident had too much of an impact on her health. Right. I've always seen her quite brave, quite strong. She's been this super mom, in my life. I've always seen her that way. But this incident brought out all the vulnerabilities in front of me. Right. She was there with me initially, so there were times when she used to cry during nights, and when she used to think that I'm asleep, she used to cry, and I used to kind of keep an eye on her. And I used to tell her that all the time, constantly, that I'm all right, mom, I'm all right. There's nothing wrong with me. Even when there were days when I used to. It used to be so painful. It used to be so. I used to be in a dark place myself. But then I used to put on a brave face for her. Because I knew that if I don't, it's gonna
break
really
her.
like kind of break up. It did actually somehow, I feel, because health wise, she got diabetes after diabetic. She became a diabetic after that. Even my father, and the stress of it all was too much for them.
Right.
Because both of them were working at the time. So professionally also they got hit because of this.
No, I'm sure it must have been a very difficult time for your entire family. And how long has it been since the accident now?
It's been 9 years now. 10. It will be 10 years in February this year.
Right.
And it's such a long time now.
Do you think you've overcome the trauma, or does it still haunt you?
See, it's still, like I told you, the memories are still fresh. I still remember the entire episode in detail, and the pain of it all, the difficulty of overcoming the odds, and then this entire recovery process. I remember each and everything. But yes, that it doesn't haunt me anymore. Right? I've come to talk about it in a very normal sense of manner, in the sense that when I talk about it now, it's okay. I don't take it with me when I go back to sleep. I don't get those nightmares anymore now. I don't get I don't lose my sleep over it. So I'm fine talking about it now. So yeah.
Right. And did it impact your mental health in any way?
Of course it did. I didn't realize initially. I thought that me accepting the situation and then moving on with my life was
be enough.
Good enough, yeah. But then I think it was my mental, the mental impact kind of happened quite late. See, 2 years after, 2.5 years after the incident, I didn't realize it first. When I started getting these, these small hints started that kind of pointed towards any some kind of mental stress that I was going through.
Right.
But these, I used to have these flashes, these nightmares. It all started with this. I used to, once or twice a month, I used to get these flashes. I used to wake up at night screaming my lungs out, and I used to experience that kind of pain that I went through at that time, exact moment when my scalp it came off, So I used to wake up screaming, and I used to cry a lot. I used to shout and yell in a manner that I found myself in the similar situation
again and again
at the time. Yeah. And I was I had these anger issues. I used to get upset with people around me for no reason. I used to shout a lot. I used to and then these bouts of self-harm started. I used to get these I used to lock myself sometimes in my room and just sit alone, stare at a wall, and this strong feeling of banging my head into that wall came.
Oh God.
So all these things started happening to me, and I did not realize it at first. Almost 6 months of experiencing this was the first time when I was told by my sister. I used to share these things with my sister sometimes.
Right.
But I just keep this feeling of banging my head to the wall. What should I do? And she used to get scared, and she was like, I think you might have a problem.
Right.
You should go see a doctor. And initially I hesitated. I was like, okay, this can't happen to me, right? I'm strong enough. I will overcome it. But when I realized that I cannot and I really need help, it was that time I started, I went to this doctor and started therapy about it. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and a lot of other symptoms like insomnia. So yeah, I went into therapy, and for a year or so, I had these sessions. So I still sometimes do get these flashes, these I still go into that kind of difficult space again. Whenever I still get panic attacks, about certain situations. But then now I'm more equipped to deal with the situation because of the therapy that it helped a lot.
Right, because you probably know the triggers, you know how to deal with it now, right?
Yes,
so you're more aware of how
even
you're
my
feeling.
family.
Right.
Yes, even my family now knows, so everyone around me is quite aware now.
Right.
So it helps.
Okay. And tell me something, you were just newly married when this incident happened, right? So, and you straight away went into a very difficult phase with your health. How did this impact your marriage, if at all?
Well, it did, if not my initial situation with the accident and other and treatment, but yes, my mental health, when that got affected, it had direct implications on my married life,
Right.
especially my relationship with my husband. Because like I told you that it was difficult for Varun also, for him also to deal with that situation. So even he took his time to come to terms with things,
Right.
and how things changed for us. So and very I think for a long time that distance between us, initially, because we when I was in Delhi for the entire time of the period of the treatment, he couldn't visit me every day, he couldn't come there every day, right? Because so he used to twice or thrice a month he used to come and visit me and stay for a few days and then go back again. So that distance also took its toll. Right, we didn't quite get to spend that time with each other initially, and kind of be with each other in that difficult. So I mean, like he couldn't really understand what was happening with me when I used to get flashes and when I used to get these, like I told you, these periods of calmness and then sudden outbursts. So he couldn't understand that. And even I was not quite open about it with him. Somehow all my went up frustrations were, they used to come out on him.
Right.
So yes, our relationship was somehow affected and compromised. But then again, like I told you, I realized that nobody's going to help me until I decided. So I took charge of my life. I took charge of the situation, and amongst the two of us, I think I believe I'm the stronger person. So I decided to change things for myself, rather than just sit and wait for somebody to help me out. So I when I got better, I decided to go into therapy. I used to, come back and share it with him. I was quite open with him later on. And I used to, share whatever I was feeling, whether it was anger or hate or love or any emotion, I used to be quite open with him then. Even if I had some kind of reservations about my injury, my anything that was going on with me, I used to share it with him.
Right.
And
did that make you bond eventually?
It did, I would define the relationship between us. It's not very conventional in the sense like usually husband-wife relationships are.
Right.
I'm like, even he's not like an open book. And, we have to make that effort to make the other person sit and talk about what they're going through.
Right.
It's not with me, but with him, I have to do that.
Right. Okay.
So I'm the person who's always taking that first step.
Right.
So, now when we converse, we are quite comfortable when we kind of, we are very open and honest with each other now.
Right.
About whatever we're feeling, right? So if he doesn't like anything about it, about me or about any situation that we are in currently, he just expresses it. He doesn't refrain. And I'm quite happy that he does that. And similar is with me.
Right.
So
And it's
yeah,
been
we found that in the parents.
right. And it's been almost over a decade now that you've been married, right? So
Yeah.
when you look back today, do you think you would have wanted to do anything differently?
Well, in terms of my marriage, in context of that, I think it would have been a bit helpful if we were together throughout that period of my
Right.
that situation, that treatment and surgeries and all, because then he would have been able to kind of accept
Right.
easier. It would be easier for him. It would have been easier for me also to understand what he was going through.
Yeah.
During that time, there were days when I was telling him, we used to talk on phone, and I used to tell him about, okay, I went to the doctor today and this happened and he told me this, and he used to snap at me. He's like, why are you telling me this? And I used to snap back again. I was like, why shouldn't I tell you this?
Right.
And we never had that kind of proper normal conversation. Because both of us, somehow he also didn't know how to deal with the situation. I was also in that frame of mind where I was lost myself.
Yeah, you were too overwhelmed.
Yes. So we used to kind of, we never had that kind of proper conversation. We never kind of understood each other during that time. We never got a chance to do that. So I think spending more time with each other, if we were not apart, to that distance, I think that would have been quite helpful.
No, absolutely. You know what they say, right? That communication is the cornerstone of every successful relationship. So of course, it would have made a whole lot of a difference. And no one can know that better than you and I. We're both from the comms background. I had to put that cheesy plug there. So
True.
Right. Okay.
And communication is always not about words, right?
Of course.
It's about, you can just be there, not talk, and then yet understand each other.
Yeah. It's 70% is non-verbal communication, we were taught, remember?
Yes, it's not just about words. Yes. True.
Of course. Okay. Let's go into a lighter section now and enter a rapid fire, and then we'll end this podcast. Okay. I'm going to ask you some rapid questions, and you have to respond to them in a fiery manner. Okay. Okay. First one. What's on your bucket list?
Oh, a lot though, but the only things that I'm concerned right now is I really want to learn belly dancing,
Oh, wow.
I somehow got this. My kids love Noora Fatehi, though my wish has nothing to do with her. But then, of course, because they're so obsessed with her songs, somehow I feel like, I think I should learn belly dancing. And
how sweet. It's amazing to have daughters and you can do such crazy things with them. How amazing.
Yes. They're better already. They're better at belly dancing.
Okay. The most unsolicited advice that you've ever heard?
Oh, I think it has to be about kids. I've repeatedly during that, like you were asking me, when relatives used to come and give you say certain things. At that time, I all I heard was, you should have kids. I think you'll forget about everything.
Oh God.
I was like, okay, this thing happened and I'm not being able to access it, can't be absorb it completely, and you're telling me to have kids. So this has to be the most, unsolicited, worthless advice that ever
sure
someone could.
I'm sure.
Exactly.
Describe yourself in 3 words.
Okay. I always have too many words to describe myself.
I know. That's why I put the question there.
Okay, so a difficult one, but I would say I'm gritty and I'm confident, and yes, I'm friendly. I'm too friendly.
I think you're missing out on tenacious. You're very tenacious.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. You can add to that.
Yeah. If you were to give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Okay. Well, I've my younger self has made a lot of bad decisions in my life. I've read. I think. So if at all anything, I think I would tell my younger self to be a little less impulsive and more focused, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. One regret that you have.
Okay. See, honestly, I don't have any regrets. Currently, in current state of mind, I have no regrets. Yeah. I don't regret anything.
Good.
It's just that I found that, space in my life where I am just happy with being myself, whatever.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. If you were granted 3 wishes, what would you wish for?
Okay, well, the first one has to be that, I wish really to eat all this favorite food, this sumptuous food, and never gain. I'm in Amritsar. Come on,
Yeah.
food destination.
Yeah. Oh, I've lived there for a year and a half. I know.
I know, yeah. I love to try out these new dishes, traditional ones also, and this fusion food but and of course you should know that these are not these habits are not good for our waist, right? So I really wish to eat anything and everything and never gain. And then another one has to be like to find a mute button for the voices in my head. Yeah, sometimes my head is yeah.
Don't we all? Yeah.
So yeah,
nice one.
It's like that.
One more.
And one more. Then one more has to be invisibility. Yeah, it's going to be cool to be invisible, right?
Oh wow,
so cool.
Nice. Okay.
So my kids will have a superhero, superwoman.
Okay. Who's your favorite superhero?
Okay, my favorite superhero. Well, I don't idolize someone so much that they should be my favorite superhero would be, in real life it would be my mom, yes. And my mother has to be it.
Yeah,
she's the one I really she's my actual source of strength, the core of everything. So yeah, it has to be her.
Awesome. If you were to describe your life in a song, which song would that be?
Okay. Okay. So yeah, see the Desi version, I would say the Desi version of the song would be like this one from Highway, Pataka Guddi. And otherwise, see, I love Girl on Fire by Alicia Keys.
Right.
I think it would be, that's the song I think I would probably briefly use.
Right. I think Pataka Guddi suits you. It's just bang on.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, my entire family, my brood of cousins have already dedicated the song to me so many times.
Rightly so. Yeah. Okay. When life gives you lemons, you would complete the sentence.
Well, I will definitely make a nice achar. Yeah, I love eating achar.
I was expecting this from you.
Come on now. Lemon achar. So it has to be obvious.
Of course. Okay, the first word that comes to your mind when I say the following: vanity.
Vanity is what it is. It's worthless. It's of no use. It's worthless. Fashion is comfort.
Right.
And especially in lockdown, I think, come on, lockdown is like, it's been the best time for me, not having to dress up.
Agree.
Every day, yeah.
Life's
good, yeah. Life's good. It's anything and everything you make it out to be,
Good. Unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias is damaging. It's very damaging.
So what about patriarchy?
Patriarchy needs to be kicked in the ass. It's not one word, but it's sentiment. It's the entire sentiment. It needs to just be,
Right.
It needs to go out. Yeah.
Right. Beauty
is, beauty's, I don't know, to each his own. I feel beauty cannot be described. You cannot describe beauty, right?
Right. Society.
Society, well, it's too judgmental for my own sense. It's really difficult. Situations are made difficult because of this fact that society is sometimes too judgmental of our situations.
And last but not the least, Neha.
Well, Neha is this, I would say Neha is an ordinary girl who just wants to be happy and who just wants to have fun and living. It's not, life doesn't have to be quite stressful.
Right.
I think one should be just happy in whatever situation you are.
Right. Now I think you're the right example for that. And you've just risen from such difficult times. You've been absolutely tenacious and very, very strong about it. And I think your attitude is quite an inspiration for people like me and everybody else who's listening right now. So thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'll keep you posted on when this podcast is out. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Diksha. Thank you. It was lovely speaking to you as always. And I really hope that, we catch up soon as well.
Yes, I hope so too. You take care of yourself. Yeah. And give my love to both your baby girls.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I will.
Bye. Bye.